NRL finals. This weekend, we've got the Friday game is Panthers versus Storm. Panthers have James Fisher-Harris and Moses Leota. Fisher-Harris from Northland, the Hokianga region. Moses Leota's from Auckland. I think I saw somewhere Moses Leota's from Mount Roscoe in Auckland. So shout out to him. And of course, Scott Sorensen. He's from Sydney, but he's got that Aotearoa Kiwis lineage in his veins. And the Panthers are a fantastic team, probably the best team in the NRL. We all know that. And they take on the Melbourne Storm. Will Warbrick backing up. You've got Remus Smith, another player from Sydney with that Aotearoa Kiwis lineage. He is on the wing for the Storm. And Nelson Asafa-Solomon is on the bench from Wellington. And, of course, Jerome Hughes from Wellington. He is back at halfback. Alec MacDonald didn't actually play the game last week, so my whole idea about Asafa-Solomon, Alec MacDonald, the balance they offer off the bench, never happened. And he's not named this week, so shout out to him. Tough ask for the Broncos going to the Panthers, but we'll see what happens there. I'm sure we'll touch on a few ideas as we roll through the next game where the Broncos take on the Warriors. The Broncos have Jesse Arthurs. He is an East Coast Bays junior, which is pretty much North Shore, Auckland. And they also have Jordan Ricky Hornby Jr. from Christchurch. They are the only Kiwi-NRL Broncos in the top 17. No Xavier Willison, no Dean Mariner. Which we talked about all season. They were always kind of outside the top 17, but they got a lot of great opportunities during State of Origin with injuries as well, and they were really impressive. Like, you think back, I've thought a lot about the Napier loss to the Broncos the Warriors had. That was Dean Mariner's, that was the Dean Mariner show. And he's, as I've said a few times this season, Dean Mariner's not good enough for the Broncos top 17, and neither is Xavier Willison. Both of them, they're top 17 players elsewhere. So unfortunately, they aren't playing finals footy against the Warriors. I've also thrown out this idea about Jesse Arthurs. He is at least a Aotearoa A player. And we're going to see a second tier Aotearoa Kiwis group named over the coming weeks ahead of the international window. Jesse Arthurs, I don't think he's Watene Zelezniak, Molatalo, Jermaine Sako, or Jordan Rapana, but he's pretty damn good, and he's in the tier below. So he's not quite Will Warbrick either, but he's in the mix. He's a representative player, I believe, for Aotearoa at some stage. Jordan Ricky's going to be pushing for Aotearoa Kiwis selection and his debut. They take on the Warriors. Warriors are obviously stacked with Aotearoa talent. And of course, they are where we like to put the spotlight and the focus and the attention on. Thinking back to the game in Napier, and I wrote this in the preview, where the whole storyline about the Broncos at that stage was them missing their State of Origin players. And as I tweeted, and as I wrote in the written preview on our website, thenews-case.com, the Warriors were also missing top 17 players. I would suggest they are just as important as the players the Broncos were missing. But at the time, and any time, and around when other people think back to that game, it's all about the Broncos missing players. It's all about the baby Broncos. Because they were missing Reece Walsh, they were missing Selwyn Cobbo, they were missing Tom Flegler, they were missing Payne Haas and Patrick Carrigan. All really good players. Wade Egan's kind of important to the Warriors as well, as we've seen a lot in recent weeks. He wasn't playing against the Broncos. I think Te Maire Martin's really important to the Warriors, but I'm open to the debate around who is better, Te Maire Martin or Luke Metcalf. Personally, I believe Te Maire Martin's better. I think Te Maire Martin's a better defender. And even if you think Luke Metcalf's better, that was the loss to the Broncos in Napier was Luke Metcalf's first game of the season, which wasn't close to his best game of the season. So even if you think Luke Metcalf is a better six than Te Maire Martin, It was a disjointed performance from Metcalf. The Warriors were also missing Mitchell Barnett, who is now their starting prop, and Dylan Walker. So you think the Broncos were missing 5 State of Origin players. The Warriors have a full-strength team right now. The team that Andrew Webster wants. The top 17 that Andrew Webster has selected. And the Warriors were also missing 5 players in their loss to the Broncos in Napier. Tamaita Martin, Wade Egan, Mitchell Barnett, Dylan Walker, and someone else off the top of my head. Jazz Tavanga. Again, Jazz Tavanga isn't the best Warriors player, but he's a top 17 player. So both the Broncos and the Warriors were missing 5 top 17 players in that game. Yet the storyline of that game was the baby Broncos. It was the Broncos winning without their State of Origin players. But the Warriors were missing 5 players who are all top 17 lads as well. And now being in the final stage and looking back, we know how good Wade Egan is. We know how good Mitchell Barnett is because he's starting prop and he doesn't get dominated physically. We know at the end of the season how important Dylan Walker is. Passing, his speed, his agility. You could say the same thing about Jazz Tavanga because Jazz Tavanga comes off the bench and he's pretty ruthless himself. And as one of Tamaita Martin's biggest fans, I'm going to say the same stuff about Tamaita Martin because he chases a lot in defense. He's got good skill, good touches. And I think he is a better player at number 6 for this team with his distribution and his defense than Luke Metcalf. What do you make of that idea coming into this finals game?
Well, I'm just having a peek at some of these, what do you call them? Like players who played when and what, which isn't quite backing up my my theory as much as I hoped it would by like some of the records of the Warriors with and without those players. But I can tell you that Wade Egan has missed 2 games this season, and they were both losses. One was the loss to the Broncos, and one was, I think, the loss to the Dolphins right at the end last week of their regular season. So they haven't won without him this year. It's not a huge sample size there. And obviously they were missing a lot of other players in both of those games. The Dolphins, they had players rested and then other guys injured in that Broncos game. So maybe that doesn't really prove a point, but they haven't won without Wade Egan. So there's that. I was just looking at Barnett's as well because I know he missed a lot of time, but that's not quite as good because he did play that Dolphins loss.
You're taking this idea and stretching it out where I think it's just simple. For that game, everyone said the Broncos were missing players.
Yeah.
The Warriors were
cancelled out by the opposite.
Yeah, the Warriors were missing the same number of players, and they were all top 17 players. If the Australians gave a crap about anyone else except for themselves and State of Origin, you know, Tamaita Martin, Kiwi International. That's kind of it. But they are 5 top 17 players, and like Wade Egan's one of the best players. Mitchell Barnett's starting prop. Dylan Walker's crucial. And then you got Jazz Tavanga as well. So it's just something to ponder ahead of this game because I think you're going to hear it a lot in some of the coverage and stuff like that as well. The other detail I was pondering for this game is the propensity for errors from Reece Walsh and Selwyn Cobbo. And this is really important to ponder because it's a bit of a conundrum. Reece Walsh, and especially Reece Walsh, he makes a lot of errors. He is first for errors. Can you just double check what I wrote in my yarn? I think he's first for errors this season. But Reece Walsh...
Yeah, and I think was second last year.
Yeah,
something like that.
But he's definitely first for this season, right?
But you did say he was first with 48 errors. I haven't got it open, but I just read it before we started.
Well, keep it open. Like that's what you need to refer to it.
It's my research material.
Reece Walsh is first for errors in the whole NRL. But again, what does Reece Walsh do? He scores a lot of tries and he sets up a lot of tries. So you can see how he makes up for his errors with his attacking production and the energy he brings to the Broncos. So you can say the same thing about Selwyn Cobbo. Selwyn Cobbo's a finisher in the corner. He takes a lot of big runs. He's a big body, and he's just a really good winger. So Reece Walsh and Selwyn Cobbo, they have been top 3 for errors in the last 2 seasons. Reece Walsh was top 3. I think Zach Lomax was actually first for errors last season. Then Reece Walsh was second. Selwyn Cobbo was third. This season it goes Reece Walsh, Dominic Young, Selwyn Cobbo. And we saw Dominic Young hit his average last week. He made 2 errors and he averages 1.8 errors. So that gives you a sign that Reece Walsh and or Selwyn Cobbo will make an error at some point. That error may be in an attacking position, and it may save the Warriors from conceding a try. It might switch momentum, give the Warriors the footy. Now they're rolling downfield. Best case scenario for the Warriors is that Reece Walsh and or Selwyn Cobbo, they make an error down their end of the field, and that presents the Warriors with an opportunity. Again, this is finals footy, so we're looking for the smallest margin to take advantage of. And it's almost a guarantee at this point, given the last 2 seasons, and the weird fact that Walsh and Cobbo are top 3 for errors in each of the last 2 seasons, they will give the Warriors an opportunity at some point. Maybe it's 2 opportunities, maybe it's 3, but at least one opportunity. Can the Warriors take advantage of it? That is a really important nugget as well, because you know it's going to come.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to think about in the context of the last game as well, because the Knights game for the Warriors, the first 15 minutes of that were astonishingly good for the Warriors. Like, everything was going right, and the Knights did make a couple of errors. I think Greg Marzhew had one early on that spilling the ball in the tackle or something like that, and then they go up and score. I think there was a penalty or 2 in their favor, and it was utter dominance for 15 minutes. And it felt like at that point, well, they're going to go on and put like 50, 60 points on these dudes in a finals game. What's going on here? Of course, when that happens in a rugby league game, you also have to take in context, like, is this just one team is unstoppable, or is this like they've had all the territory, the other team's made some errors? Will that be sustainable if the other team stops making errors? And that did happen later on in that half, didn't it? And the Knights closed it up a little bit. So the Warriors pulled away in the latter stages, but definitely the first 15 minutes of there, they gave themselves a great start, which has not always been the trait of the Warriors this season. And it was on the back of capitalizing on opposition mistakes and their own good territory, which are kind of the same thing.
You just thought, like, rugby league, it's similar to cricket, where you don't know what the pitch is doing until both teams have a bat or have a ball. Yeah,
that's a good analogy.
In rugby league, you don't know what the game's going to how the game's going to play out if one team has all the footy and the other team doesn't. At some point, it's going to even up, and if that even up happens, both teams can score points. So you always got to watch out for that, because even if the Warriors are dominated by the Broncos early in this game, you got to wait to see if the Warriors can get some repeat sets, get their flow. Even if you wait for Dylan Walker to come on the field, you need to have that patience and see how both teams perform when they are completing sets. The difference I'm interested in, the Panthers don't make those errors.
Yeah.
So, I think I wrote Sania Taruva is leading the errors for Panthers, but he only averages 0.9 errors per game. Other players average more, but they don't play as much as Taruva, so they don't have as many errors. And the Panthers rolled the Warriors by not making those errors. They don't present those opportunities. There were a few drop balls, like Isaiah Yeo hit a drop ball, but he's not doing that every week.
And also the Warriors did make errors in that game, didn't they? which is like if the Panthers make a couple errors, but the Warriors are still making more, well, that's where the arm wrestle goes.
Yeah, and at least against the Broncos, you're probably going to have a situation where every Warriors error is matched by the Broncos,
Yeah.
specifically Walsh or Cobo, where the Panthers don't present those opportunities. Another key area to attack is Ezra Mam defensively. You know it well. What does Marata Niokore do to the half on the left side of the field, the Warriors' right edge? He's running at them. He's running at
He
Talatau.
squashes them.
He's running at Talatau Mone. He's running at Adam Clune. Adam Clune, he made some tackles last week against Niokore. He was pretty good defensively. And Ezra Mam, for context, we said Adam Clune is the worst tackler in the Knights team that lost to the Warriors. Ezra Mam is the worst tackler in the Broncos team named for this game. I think he misses over 4 tackles a game. Do you have the...
I can see if I can find it.
Well, this is why you need it there. So you're right on the money. And Kurt Capewell's right there with Ezra Mam. I believe Kurt Capewell does defend on the left edge because you've got Jordan Ricky on the right edge. So you've got the worst tacklers for the Broncos as far as average missed tackles per game defending together at left edge.
Ezra Mam is making 80% of his tackles. Averages. Where's it going to tell me? It doesn't tell me on this
Well,
page.
You got the yarn I wrote? That's what you need.
One of these tabs, we're flicking between too many different things. 3, 2, 1. Maybe not 3, 2, 1. So, where did you write it? It's got to be in here somewhere. That's Walsh's errors. That is Clune. Mam defends alongside Kurt Capewell, who averages 3.6 missed tackles per game, second to Mam's 4.5 missed tackles per game. So expect the full quiver of Warriors shape on their right edge.
Yeah, just keep that open. Don't put that anywhere else.
It's not going anywhere. It was already there.
Right
I was just flicking between apps. I got stuck.
So Niokore is running at Mam. Mam might be able to make his tackles. He might miss 4 tackles per his average. Kurt Capewell might struggle to handle Niokore as well. But as we saw against the Knights last week, Clune made his tackles. But the issue is having to do it over and over again and the decision-making around those tackles. Because I wrote this as well. Adam Clune made his tackles and the Warriors scored points down that right edge. So Adam Clune making his tackles didn't stop the Warriors scoring points there. I think Nickel Clockstar had a try. We had a Watene-Zelezniak try. Rocco Berry scored a try. They're all on the right edge. So Mam might make his tackles. Kurt Capewell might make his tackles as well. But if you're challenging the decision-making, and we know the Warriors' shape. They got a decoy. They got a pass out the back. You got Sean Johnson in slow-mo. All of that is going to challenge the decision-making, which then leads us to situations like we had against the Knights where Greg Marzhew and Bradman Best are trying to tackle Rocco Berry together, leaving Watene-Zelezniak wide on the wing. And interestingly, the 2 leading missed tacklers for the Broncos are on their left edge, right up against the Warriors' right edge, where they've been fantastic all season long.
That is a nice promising element there. I've still one thing I was going to ask you before when we were talking about that previous game, because we mentioned the amount to which both teams were missing players. In that light, is there stuff that you take from that game specifically leading into this game, or is it sort of like a scratch it off? Neither team was presenting what they're going to present in this kind of game, so it doesn't really matter?
It was very interesting to look back on it because the Warriors had less possession and they had the exact same number of runs, but the Warriors had more line breaks, more tackle breaks, more post-contact meters. They were they weren't better because the Broncos had 2 forced dropouts. The Warriors had none. The Warriors were 70% completion. The Broncos were up over 80. So it was a really good game of footy. Two decent, evenly matched teams given the players they had available. But again, they were missing a lot of players. So I'm not going to judge a Warriors team without Wade Egan. That seems ridiculous. In the same way, you're not going to judge a Broncos team without Reece Walsh, even though Tristan Saylor is really good and Dean Mariner comes in. He's really good, and so on. I do remember at the time we were talking a lot about the Broncos defense, because they were really condensing their defensive line, and we talked about it on our podcast. The Broncos wingers were 10 meters off the sideline for like sets in the midfield. Usually you do that when you're trying to pin them in the corner. Everyone just crams in, smash up blokes, keep them down there. You don't do it in the midfield where opposition teams can shift out on their edges to that space. But the Broncos, the thing that I am interested in from that game is how the Broncos defended, where they condensed the middle, which then allows you to put pressure on the passes. Even though Dylan Walker wasn't playing the game, you still had Tohu Harris, you still had Fanua Blake. So the Broncos could pressure those middle forward passes, and they were very aggressive in how they kept moving forward. NRL defense, rugby league defense, you've got to keep your feet moving, and if it is your game plan, you need to keep moving forward. You don't want to be moving backwards for sure. You might want to slide over, but you want to keep moving forward and keep your feet moving. The Broncos were aggressive in the sense that they kept pushing forward, which then clutters all those passing lanes where the Warriors have their shape. So it can be a bit disjointed if they do make the right decisions. Whether the Broncos do that again or not, I don't know. They may want to, because it's just something different that could trouble the Warriors. But the Warriors might have seen that and they might be prepared. They might be cleaner and more crisp in their shape, and you might want to dribble a kick in behind that winger. You might want to chip to the corner. You might want to try a few trick shots to get the ball into the space, whether that space is between the Broncos winger and the sideline, or whether that space is behind the Broncos winger. Those are areas the Warriors can target if the Broncos do get into their aggressive defense baggy once again.
And I'd also suggest that this is a semi-final or a preliminary final, I think we're supposed to call them. Preliminary final between the two buzziest teams in the NRL this season, like the two teams that have the most kind of hype and fizz about them, particularly in their local markets. And one of those local markets is a lot bigger than the other, but still, like the Warriors have definitely captured captured the zeitgeist across Aotearoa anyway. And I would suggest probably a lot in Brisbane too, because this is them going back to the place where, like, we've just had a glorious, glorious game at Mount Smart, sellout crowd, incredible atmosphere, all that good stuff. And now they're going to play in the city where they were based at the time when they weren't allowed to play at Mount Smart. So there is a bit of a like, there's already some fan base there, and there would have been anyway, because there's a lot of Kiwis who live in Queensland. And it is a sellout at Suncorp Stadium. And I know the Broncos have also got heaps of hype and momentum behind them too. And there would have been a lot of tickets sold for that, because they knew they were going to be playing in that game a long time before we knew the Warriors were going to be in that game. So tickets were already sold to some extent. But I wouldn't be surprised if that feels like a 50-50 atmosphere at Suncorp.
Oh, definitely. The Warriors fans overran the Dolphins fans at Suncorp. The Warriors fans overran the Titans fans on the Gold Coast. Like, that is definitely going to happen. Even, like, forget about the pandemic stuff where they were based in Redcliffe. It's just pure Warriors fans. Like, the thing
for sure
Australian teams don't want to say is that the Warriors bolster their crowds in Australia.
They do, though.
They sell more tickets for Warriors games because the Warriors fans in Australia want to get out there and support the team. One other small area of the Warriors that I am interested in, and this again, another theme of the season, you don't initially think this is going to be the case, but I can see a situation where Rocco Berry and Adam Pompey are better than Herbie Farnworth, the Herbal, and Katoni Staggs. That sounds crazy. But I think that is the story of this game, where people who haven't watched the Warriors, they're not going to know how good Rocco Berry is. Because Rocco Berry tackles absolutely everything and anyone. And he's going to be tackling Herbie Farnworth. I think Herbie Farnworth, the Herbal, he was better than Berry in Napier, but I think Rocco Berry is going to want to double back on that and get some retribution. And Adam Pompey isn't as solid as Rocco Berry, but based on what he did last week against the Knights, if he does that again against the Broncos, and if he can handle Katoni Staggs and he can showcase his attacking talents, because I saw when I was diving into that Napier game, Katoni Staggs was tackling 70%, and he missed a lot of tackles. And again, Katoni Staggs is going to be helping Adam Reynolds dip in on Jackson Ford, running the hard line. Tamaida Martin's going to be working his magic. I can see a situation where Adam Pompey is better than Katoni Staggs. And on my scale of 10 being, that's pretty crazy, and 0 being chill, bruh, that's going to happen. This is a 7 or an 8 on the crazy scale, but I think Rocco Berry and Adam Pompey can be better than Staggs and Farnworth and outplay them. And if you go through the team, there's a few other candidates or stuff like that. Wade Egan's the best dummy half on the field again. This might be 3 weeks in a row of finals footy where Wade Egan's the best dummy half on the field. Because he was the best dummy half on the field against the Panthers, even though the Warriors lost. He was the best dummy half on the field against the Knights, and he's better than Billy Walters, and he's better than Tyson Smoothies. So we have to see how the game unfolds, but there are some...
Where's that one on the crazy scale?
It's
about 3 or 4?
For the Broncos matchup or the 3 finals thing?
Well, it's a 1 for the first 2 games because that's already happened. But well, I guess maybe it's a little bit subjective even still. But I don't think anyone's denying he was the best dummy half in the Knights game, certainly. But for the Broncos matchup specifically, where would you slide that one?
Like a 2?
Hey, there we go.
Like a chill out, brothers. Wade Egan's the man. So, yeah, he's pretty good at dummy half. And with all of this is in our previous work. You can go previous podcasts. You can go previous Aotearoa Warriors Diary and listen to us talk about how the Warriors attack and how it starts with Wade Egan targeting the space around the ruck, whether that's actually getting behind the ruck with his running or whether it is throwing his no-look pass where he's looking at a defender who draws that defender into him, then passing out the back. You might go with the little trick play where it's got Tohu Harris, Shans Klokster, and Wade Egan getting out a dummy half, giving Egan 2 different options, targeting a defender. All that's happening in the middle to open up space along the defensive line out wide, as we've talked about the Warriors plan all season long. It's going to be a fun game. There's a possibility the Broncos just blow the Warriors away, as we saw with the Panthers. And if that's the case, fair play to the Broncos. I do think the Panthers and Broncos have been the best teams all season. I think the Broncos are certainly favourites for this game. And that's where you're going to really learn about this Warriors team, because to win the NRL Grand Final, they will need to upset the Panthers probably. And you're not going to be able to do that, if you couldn't upset the Broncos this season. You look in the games they've played against the Panthers and Broncos, this will be the 4th game, maybe? Yes? Between the Warriors and either the Panthers or Broncos this season. The Warriors have lost 3 of them. They lost the regular season games to the Broncos and the Panthers. Then they lost the finals game to the Panthers. Now they're coming up against the Broncos. So that's just the lay of the land. But I do believe there are some areas for the Warriors to target, and there is an opportunity for the Warriors to settle into their footy, to play their footy, to control the game, execute their shapes, execute their process, execute their strategy. Part of which might be that smaller bench, a little bit of mobility, speed, agility, and skill, like Bailey Sirinen. You'd think he's Fanua Blake. the way he runs the footy. But he's Bailey Sirenen. Like, he's our dummy half cover. But he runs like Fanua Blake for whatever reason. It's like him against the Knights. He was 10 meters per run. So,
and he scored a try, barging over just as Fanua Blake did earlier.
And Dylan Walker. Like, Dylan Walker and Bailey Sirenen are not big forwards, but they scored tries like big forwards on the weekend. So that's pretty cool. Storm versus Panthers. I just love that Aotearoa Kiwis front row pairing. Fish Harris and Leota. They're just so fun to watch. You've got the Warbrick buzz, which is going to be fantastic. Hopefully Hughes does play, because there is, like, suddenly Aotearoa Kiwis halves. Hughes is under an injury cloud. Sean Johnson's got a calf niggle, which you don't, like, neither Hughes or Johnson is going to want to be carrying an injury into Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League. Those situations, they usually don't play for Aotearoa Kiwis. You're going to heal up your injury. So you're going from possible Sean Johnson and Jerome Hughes to maybe Kieran Foran and Dylan Brown, which is pretty cool. But it's not quite as good as Sean Johnson and Jerome Hughes. So watch out for that. Asafa Solomona's impact, like, the Storm are good when Asafa Solomona's on the field. I'd like a plus-minus stat with Asafa Solomona. Like an NBA plus-minus thing, because when he's on the field, the Storm are plus, plus, plus. When he's off the field, it's minus. And I think that's my hunch. I'd love to have some statistical reinforcements there for my gut feel. But I think his impact off the bench could determine how that game unfolds.
Yeah, I remember talking about the idea of plus-minus rugby league stats earlier in the year about Warriors players, because we were wondering if that would be a case with Dylan Walker as well, which I think we decided maybe it wouldn't be, because he had a couple of games where he had to cover in the halves and they lost, so that might have spoiled him a little bit. But I still think over the course of the season he'd be very high on that. I would like to see what that looks like. Surely someone's keeping those kind of numbers somewhere. I don't know, but give us a yell if someone's listening and they know where they can find that stuff.
Well, I've got my gut hunch. Like, I don't need.
Yeah, the gut hunch is the gut hunch is a good start. Maybe the gut hunch is all you need. I don't know. Do you? Because I think, I don't know. I give the Warriors quite a decent chance of turning over the Broncos. I think that's quite a close game. I do. I mean, I acknowledge the Broncos are going to be relatively, uncontroversial favorites there, but I think that game definitely will be closer than whatever the TAB odds are suggesting or whatever. Do you give the Storm, like, what kind of chance do you give the Storm in turning over the Panthers? Because I do think from the Warriors' perspective, we've seen what they look like matched up against the Panthers. It wasn't great. I don't really see them beating the Panthers. I can see them getting past the Broncos and getting to a grand final. I don't see them having much of a chance against the Panthers in a grand final, but they could beat the Storm. Like, I could see them doing the Storm in a grand final. But can the Storm do them the favor of giving them that chance by beating the Panthers? I'm not so sure, but I don't know. Do you have a vibe on that?
I think
both games, even if you want.
Yeah, well, that's my point, is to compare both games. The Storm aren't going to have fans in Penrith. The Warriors are going to have a lot of fans at Suncorp Stadium, so that's different. The Panthers don't give you the opportunities that the Broncos do. That's different. I don't think the Storm have been as comprehensive defensively or with their attacking strategies as the Warriors. So they're completely different situations, and I think that is the thing working in the Storm's favor is they are the Storm, right? Like, they are the dynastic organization of our lifetimes in the NRL. I love the Storm. I love the Kiwi-NRL Storm. I love everything about the Storm. They've got that mana. That is the difference between them and the Warriors. But when you compare the situations for these games, Not only do the Broncos give you more opportunities than the Panthers, I think the Warriors are better equipped than the Storm to take those opportunities, and you factor in, like, the Warriors fans at Penrith were pretty ruckus as well. And I think I have to get into the facts and figures, but it was a pretty big crowd in Penrith for that game. Maybe their biggest crowd. I don't know. I might have to look it up as we're speaking. But the Storm aren't going to create that environment at Penrith. Let me say that. Whereas the Warriors, they do create that environment because we've seen it at various around Australia. Panthers versus Warriors had 21,525. Somehow the Panthers have had the exact same crowd for their last 3 games. So
must be sellouts.
Yeah, I think that's their max.
That was that's what kept happening at the Women's World Cup too at Eden Park, was that they broke the record like 3 times in a row each subsequent game for a women's football fixture in New Zealand. It might have been for any fixture, I can't remember. Whatever the record was, they broke it like 3 times in a row, and then they just kept tying the record. Like in all their knockout games at Eden Park, they tied the record, which is obviously just because they couldn't fit anyone else in. Should have invited some more media members or something like that, and just, I don't know if they count towards that, but still.
I think there were a lot of Warriors fans at Penrith for that game, and if the Warriors had won with a better performance, I think we would remember a lot better.
Yeah.
But because the Warriors didn't get up, because they were smoked by the Panthers, it didn't feel like there was as much Warriors support. But there was certainly some Warriors people at that game. And I don't think you're going to get the same Storm fandom in Penrith as you got the Warriors. So I think I answered your question there.